You ever get punished for doing the right thing? I don't mean making a mistake. I mean actually doing what's moral, what's honest, and then getting slapped in the face for it. That's what happened to me. They didn't say I was wrong. They said I was too honest. That's the phrase that's been stuck in my head ever since. 2 words. Quiet. Cold. Delivered like it was a compliment, but it wasn't. It was a warning. I worked in the compliance department of a logistics company. Not a sexy job, but an important one. I was the guy who double-checked expense reports, flagged internal fraud, and made sure contracts didn't cross legal boundaries. The kind of role people ignore until you find something. And I found something. Not because I was snooping. I was doing my job. One Thursday afternoon, I was auditing quarterly shipping reimbursements when I noticed an inconsistency, a batch of high-value invoices approved by a director named Mark Chen. They were for remote storage units at inflated rates way above market price and oddly recurring across 3 different states. When I cross-referenced the addresses, something didn't add up. One of the storage facilities didn't even exist. Another was listed under a company name that led to a P.O. box in Nevada, so I flagged it. Sent a report to upper management as protocol required. I didn't think much of it, I was just following the rules. The next morning, I was called into a meeting. Just me, Mark, and our department head, Valerie. She didn't greet me. She didn't sit. She just leaned against the table with her arms crossed and said, "Do you know what you're doing?" I said, "Yeah, my job." Mark didn't say a word. He just stared at me, then looked away. Valerie walked around the table slowly, like a school principal trying to intimidate a student. Then she said it. "You're very thorough, and we respect that, but maybe you're a little too honest for this role." My stomach turned. I said, "What does that mean?" She smiled. "Some things don't need to be chased. It creates friction. People get nervous. Not everything needs to be flagged, understand?" And just like that, I knew. The report had hit a nerve. It wasn't just a clerical error, it was a cover-up. And I had wandered straight into it. They didn't fire me. Not yet. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they isolated me. Suddenly, I wasn't invited to meetings. My access to certain files disappeared. Colleagues stopped chatting with me. Emails went unanswered. It was like I didn't exist anymore. I started doubting myself. Was I overreacting? Was I just making a big deal out of nothing? But then, I got an anonymous message. Sent to my personal email. No name, just a PDF attached, and one sentence. "You're not the only one who's noticed." The file was a scanned internal memo, dated 18 months earlier. Subject line, "Storage Unit Budget Flow, Chen Projects." In it, a junior accountant had raised the same concerns I had, even highlighted the fake addresses. And at the bottom of the thread was Valerie's reply, "Already handled. No further escalation." I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart racing. This wasn't new. This was old. This scam had been going on for at least a year and a half, and anyone who asked about it had been handled. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up combing through everything: reports, budget files, old emails, even cached web links. I built a folder, a big one, evidence, timeline, internal correspondences, and backup copies of every single piece of it. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I contacted a federal whistleblower hotline. They walked me through everything: protected disclosures, legal coverage, what to save, what to avoid saying out loud. They told me one thing that stuck with me. If they called you too honest, they were already preparing to push you out. Make your move before they do. And so I did. I took a leave of absence claim medical reasons and disappeared for a week. During that time, I secured legal counsel, encrypted my data, and prepared for what might come next. I didn't know how bad it would get. I didn't know who was involved beyond Valerie and Mark. But I did know one thing. I wasn't going to stay quiet. Not anymore. The hardest part about blowing the whistle isn't finding the truth. It's surviving what happens after. When I returned to work a week later, nothing looked different, but everything had changed. The looks people gave me, the whispers that stopped when I walked by, the way Mark stood behind my chair a little too long without saying a word. I knew they suspected something. And I had to act like nothing was happening. I was deep inside the machine now. Every move I made, every keystroke, every conversation, I assumed it was being monitored. So I stopped using my work laptop for anything meaningful. I carried 2 phones. I wrote notes by hand. I kept flash drives taped behind my car's dashboard. It sounds paranoid until you realize what's at stake. Over the next 2 weeks, I focused on finding patterns. I reran audits through old databases, cross-checked invoice timestamps, vendor names, wire transfers. I found more than just fake storage units. There were consulting fees paid to shell companies that didn't exist 6 months earlier. Procurement contracts rerouted to subsidiaries that led back to the same P.O. box. Reimbursements signed off by executives who hadn't even been in the office. But here's the sickest part, some of the fake vendors were under the names of former employees who had resigned under vague circumstances. They weren't just stealing money, they were laundering it through ghost identities. I didn't know if Valerie was the mastermind or just part of something bigger. But what scared me more than the fraud was how quiet it all was. No one talked. Even those who clearly knew something, like the junior accountant who'd sent me the anonymous memo, had gone completely dark. I tried to reach them again. No reply, not on LinkedIn, not by email. It was like they disappeared. And that made me realize I was running out of time. I didn't have weeks or months. One slip up and I could be the next one erased. So I accelerated, I documented everything, exported data, screenshot dashboards, recorded conversations when I could. I built a timeline that went back nearly 2 years, mapping every dirty transaction, every fake vendor, every approval trail. Then something strange happened. I got invited to a leadership retreat out of nowhere. A company getaway at a resort 2 hours outside the city. Team bonding, strategy building, mandatory attendance. On the surface, it sounded innocent, but I knew what it was. A test. Maybe worse. I had 3 days to decide to attend and play dumb, or disappear and risk them knowing I was onto them. I chose to go. I needed to see who was really pulling strings. The resort was beautiful. Too beautiful. Paid for with whose money, I wondered? At dinner, they seated me next to Mark. He smiled like nothing had ever happened, asked about my health, said they missed my detailed insights. I played along, but I noticed something. They were all watching me, not obviously, but in little wayside glances, subtle pauses in conversation, hands lingering near phones like they were recording me too. That night, I stayed up in my room, reviewing everything one more time. I had all the evidence. I just needed one more thing to witness. Someone inside the machine who was still willing to speak. On the final day of the retreat, it happened. I caught Valerie alone on the terrace, wine glass in hand, staring into the distance. I walked up and said quietly, "Why'd you do it?" She didn't pretend not to know what I meant. She didn't deny anything. She just sighed and said, "Because no one stops us. That's how this world works. You're either in or you're out. And you don't belong in." That was the moment I knew she didn't care anymore. Not about being caught, not about the company, not even about hiding it. She believed she was untouchable. I excused myself, got in my car, and drove straight to my attorney. I handed her everything, the files, the timeline, the statements, and now, Valerie's words. The pieces were finally in place. We filed the whistleblower report at the federal level. It triggered an internal corporate investigation. Quiet at first, but then people started getting pulled into HR without warning. Access revoked, emails frozen. And then one day, Mark's nameplate was gone. Just like that. No announcement, no farewell, no trace. Valerie held on longer. She was smarter. She deflected, blamed others. But I had the receipts. All of them. And when the media finally picked up the story of a major logistics firm under federal review for multi-million-dollar fraud, she didn't even try to show up to work. She resigned before the board could fire her. And me? I didn't go back. I took the settlement, cleared my name, and walked away. But not before making sure every single person who tried to bury me saw exactly how high the truth can rise when you refuse to stay silent. When it was all over, people kept asking me one question. Was it worth it? The stress, the fear, the isolation. Was it worth being called a troublemaker, a liability, a man too honest for corporate life? I used to pause when I answered. Not because I didn't know, but because the cost was real. I lost friends. I lost sleep. I lost a version of myself who once believed that doing the right thing would always be rewarded. But here's the truth. Yes, it was worth it. Not because I got revenge, not because I watched the people who tried to bury me squirm under pressure, but because I didn't let them turn me into something I'm not. Because I didn't bend. I didn't shrink. I didn't look away when the truth got ugly. After the investigation went public, the company tried to control the narrative. They released statements about internal restructuring, enhanced compliance, and new leadership commitments. But the press wasn't buying it. The headlines didn't lie. Whistleblower uncovers multi-million-dollar fraud inside leading logistics firm. And my name? It was in there. Not as a villain, as a source. An insider who chose integrity over comfort. Valerie never faced criminal charges. She cut a deal-quiet resignation in exchange for silence. Mark disappeared into private consulting, probably somewhere offshore. But their careers were stained. No board wanted to touch them. No investor trusted them. Their reputations, the very thing they had burned me to protect, were now radioactive. Meanwhile, I was offered settlements, book deals, even a speaking tour. I turned most of it down. I didn't do this for applause. I did it because someone had to. Because I couldn't keep walking into work every day knowing the truth and pretending not to see it, after everything, I started consulting for other whistleblowers. People like me. People sitting on the edge of a moral cliff, terrified to jump because they don't know what's waiting below. I helped them build parachutes, not just legal strategy, but emotional armor. Because standing up for what's right, it's lonely, but it's also powerful. Some nights, I still wake up wondering how close I came to being erased. If I hadn't opened that first invoice, if I hadn't checked that memo, if I had just accepted being too honest as a flaw instead of a warning, where would I be now? Probably still behind a desk, smiling in meetings, numbing myself with small talk and corporate nonsense, but not free, not clean, and definitely not proud. People say the system is broken, but I don't believe that. I believe the system is built to survive until someone brave enough challenges it. I wasn't brave at first. I was scared. I was angry. I was tired, but I didn't stay quiet. And that made all the difference. So if you're watching this and you've ever been told you're too honest, I want you to hear this loud and clear. That's not an insult. That's a threat from someone who fears what you might uncover. Don't let them twist your character into a weakness. Don't let them win by making you doubt your instincts. Because sometimes, the only thing standing between corruption and collapse is someone who refuses to look away. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat. Because truth doesn't destroy companies. Lies do. And I'd rather lose everything standing up for what's right than keep a job that requires me to live with my eyes closed. So what about you? What would you do if your employer told you you were too honest? Would you back down, or would you blow it all wide open?